Now, this may sound like a cheesy story, and I usually don't share these kinds of things, but the longer you get in your career, the more you may see fruits about, in terms of your work, or maybe not. The beginning of this school year, I got an email from a former student. Now, this student will probably not mind, but I'm not giving any details that, is going to put anybody out there. And the student said, I want to thank you for the lessons that you taught us. I'm about to start my life and my family, and it's so valuable to me that I can basically be confident in going into a lot of these because you told us that things were going to be okay if we just applied ourselves and followed a lot of these steps. Man, what a boost to my school year. I'd already coming from the summer, having done a lot of work this summer. I mean, I was doing like a lot of physical labor. I went outside to go work because I just wanted to. I just got tired of sitting down and, in your own classroom. You get comfortable there. So I was kind of tired coming in the school year. But that email, boy, did that thing fire me up. But I also remember that one of the best things that happened as a teacher that I learned was that repetition is actually your strongest suit. Now, I said that really nice story just to land on this subreddit that was recommended by OP, one of our audience members, to repeat more and more and resonate more and more what PlayStation fans are now saying about Xbox Game Pass, so that those who have been detractors, eventually those who actually have been listening to them will get it into their skulls that here is what the value proposition is. No one is saying you should go subscribe to Game Pass. I'm not saying you should. No. I won't tell you what to do with your money. However, I'm pointing out a reality here, which is that I think PlayStation got comfortable and abandoned what I think was value proposition. Xbox, on the other hand, lost so bad that now they're begging for your money. And when someone's begging for your money, at least listen to them, right? Listen. So we're back on this PlayStation Plus subreddit. And I thought, man, maybe I won't be able to read all these 500 comments, but I thought, if I read most of them, it will be hard for anybody to now come with anecdotal talk like is being done on the internet. In fact, I don't know if you guys have noticed, there have been some of the PlayStation talking heads that have been basically running their mouths and their fingers all over Twitter and all over their videos, but I've tactfully ignored them simply because they're just a very tiny minority. They live in a bubble that they've created for themselves. And yes, there are people who are in their bubble, but there are also people who are outside of that bubble. And this PlayStation Plus subreddit that was actually suggested to me by OP has unveiled something that I never would have thought was sitting there just out there in the open. Yes, it's one thing, for the it's one thing for people to say it, but it's another thing for it to actually be here on paper. Shout out to OP, by the way, just giving him his credit for actually throwing this my way. I've gotten how many videos out of this, and I think hopefully we'll get more because the comments, there's a lot. Really, guys, this is a study. Okay, so let me go ahead and kind of kick off from where I stopped last time. This person said, I don't know, sure, they get cool titles, but Game Pass is somewhat responsible for the decline in Xbox game sales due to simply just giving away top titles for a fraction. Now, like I said, repetition is always in order. It's kind of the thing that really does help to drive these conversations. So number one, before we even go ahead and start to respond to this, we have to take into account how Xbox pays developers from Game Pass. Did you know that there's some people who do not know how Xbox actually pays people on Game Pass? Did you know that? In fact, even someone like this, Legendary Drops, he says, and it's a misconception, I have got nothing against him, he says it does in fact cannibalize sales. The whole point of having games at Game Pass is to not buy the game you're playing. The effect is just a less pronounced on more widely commercially successful games. If your game breaks through, it's a huge win. If it doesn't, you're in trouble. This part is true. But what Legendary Drops doesn't even go ahead and acknowledge is that Xbox does buy the games. For instance, and I did an example just the other day. If you're coming to Xbox saying your budget for your game that you just made is $60 million, we're going to use $60 million as that. In order for you to break even from this production cost and sell the game maybe at $70, not many $70 games are coming to Xbox from third party. Let's just say $50, right? In order for you to break even, you have to sell 1.2 million copies. Then that's your break even point. I'm just putting it out there. Let's say you don't have 30% fees. I have to even negate 30% fees everywhere. 30% from Steam, 30% from Xbox console, 30% from PlayStation, and then 18% from Epic Games, and possibly maybe 18% or 12% from Xbox's app. There's stuff everywhere, man. And then if you use Unreal Engine 4, by the time you make your first $1 million, you got to start paying 4% royalty to Epic Games. But let's just say that you need 1.2 million units to break even. How do we know this number? Remember when PlayStation's own documents leaked and we found out for Marvel Spider-Man 2, they needed 7.2 million copies sold to break even. And then on the back of that, they still have to be paying Marvel rights in terms of every copy sold. Xbox comes to you and says, hey, or you go to Xbox and say, hey, give us X amount of dollars. And if you give us X amount of dollars, we'll put the game on Game Pass if you pay us this amount of money. By the way, I'm basically just citing this article, right? And so Xbox says, sure, we'll give you 50% of the cost. We'll give you $30 million and your game on Game Pass day one. And then you also can go ahead and, sell the game wherever you want to go. So now your production cost is reduced to $30 million automatically. In order for you to break even at this point now, you only got to sell 600,000 copies. The other 600,000 copies is game. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is what this person on this PlayStation subreddit, someone like Legendary Drops, who doesn't have any fanboy allegiance that I know of. I don't know, but I do know some others that have fanboy allegiances. People like Nib95, people like Reforge Gaming, as I've heard them say, this is the piece of the puzzle they're missing, including those in the media and the press that continue to make Game Pass look like it's crazy, while it was them who reported on this reality, that this is how developers get paid. Can you imagine if in a case, Microsoft completely funded the production of the game, which is actually something that happens in some instances. Let's say it's a tiny little game, $5 million budget. That's tiny in game developer world. I kid you not, guys. That is tiny. Games are very expensive to make. I've spoken to developers. I mean, whatever. Let's say your game is $5 million. Xbox shows up and says, hey, what do you need? They say, man, we don't have money to develop. We got a great idea. You pitch them and it's only $5 million. $5 million is not even a hangnail for Xbox's coffers. They say, sure, we'll zero out your cost. Just give us Game Pass day one. You go out there, they create a floor and they say the most that you can sell is probably 500,000 units after like 2-3 years because your game is so tiny, right? 500,000 units in 3 years. So 500,000 units, right? And let's just say your sales cost, because you're probably going to be doing sales by year 2. Actually, year 1, you ain't going to wait till year 2. The market's too saturated. And let's just say instead of $50 at launch, you then come in and say, okay, let's just average it to like $25, right? Because of the $50 people that will buy for $50 and people that will buy for, a small amount. You're at $12 million. Did you see that? $12 million in 5 years, right? Divided by 5. That is a $2.5 million revenue each year. You have your expenses, don't get me wrong, but guess what? You've extra money multiple ways. I mean, some of you saw the game Balatro, right? Now, I'm not saying that Game Pass funded that game, but that game sold very well. And if they could have gotten development cost, which after coming to Game Pass, they probably didn't get development cost. They probably got maybe a bag and have already sold. Let me see how many copies Balatro would have sold. We can find it. We can look at it. Balatro's on Game Pass. So they got a bag from Game Pass, from Xbox. I don't know exactly how much. Now, the cost of their game is lower, $15.99. But in looking at how many copies that they've sold so far, let's see. Balatro sales. 3.5 million copies as of 4 months ago. So Balatro is going to easily hit 5 million units, in my opinion, very soon. And they're selling everywhere else. They're selling on the Play Store and everywhere. So they have more of a multi-platform reach. So 5 million units is probably not going to be too hard for them to pull off in the next few years. So ladies and gentlemen, this talk about Xbox reducing the game sales is just a lie. Not saying that they're intentionally lying, but they're just not looking at the business paradigms. That's why this user here had to correct the other person and say Xbox/Microsoft profits off of the subscription so far as the first party goes, it's fine on their end. They're not forcing third parties to use Game Pass. They choose that themselves. So whatever they get financially is probably justified for them. And as Phil Spencer basically says, he says this. He says our deals are all over the place. This was in 2020, guys. This was almost 5 years ago, man. It's insane. That sounds unmanaged, but it's really based on the developer's need, Spencer explained. One of the things that's been cool to see is developers, usually small to mid-sized developers, might be starting a game and say, hey, we're willing to put this game on Game Pass on our launch if you guys will give us X dollars now. What we can do is we create a floor for them in terms of success of their game. They know they're going to get this return. In some other cases, Microsoft will completely fund the cost of the game. And in this situation, the developer can make money from retail sales, while Microsoft may also allow these games to release on PlayStation, Switch, and PC, with the developers taking in that revenue too. Microsoft uniquely benefits in these types of situations by having a game launch the end date on on Game Pass. For them, they've protected themselves from any downside risk. Basically, they've sold copies of the game before you even got a review copy. And I'm talking as the reviewers. The developers literally sell copies before the press even touches the game if they get a Game Pass bag during development. This person said, I recall back in the day, devs spoke about how monetization works. There are several options they choose, either getting flat out paid beforehand to put the game on the service, or they get paid by the number of installs or get paid by usage time. And it seems that devs picked whatever option they want. This person is not wrong. In fact, Phil Spencer said a lot of devs started moving away from the usage because they just wanted the cash. Like he says here, we're open to experimenting with many different partners because we don't think we have it figured out, Spencer said. When we started, we had a model that was all based on usage. Most of the partners said, yeah, we understand that, but we don't believe it. So just give us the money up front. And behold, the bag was more necessary in this case. So ladies and gentlemen, I don't see how this is a loss situation in terms of sales that people continue to make it out or try to make it out to seem, because in reality, Xbox has already bought copies of the game to go ahead and subsidize the game itself for its own users. And at the end of the day, if people don't necessarily want to actually acknowledge that, then I think they're doing a disservice to the whole conversation. Now, in terms of like sales outside in the traditional model, yeah, people will say, yeah, it does affect sales. But is anybody even considering the fact that there's also the upside in terms of games out in terms of the future sales, what I call the lag sales, which continue to go on over and over and over time, that brings in cash for the developer? It's a very interesting perspective. Thanks for watching the video. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. See you guys in another one. Peace out.